Welcome everyone, it's Raj from 3CB. So if you haven't heard, KD is out with an Achilles rupture and has missed the last 18 months and is now gearing up to return for this season for the Brooklyn Nets. The question becomes, considering his extended return to play timeline of 18 months, which is roughly double what you typically see for NBA players. For example, Rudy Gay was about 8 months. And Wesley Matthews was also about 8 months, who I think are good comparisons for KD. The question becomes, what can we expect from Durant this upcoming season? The extended layoff, in my opinion, will have Durant coming back at a higher floor than what you might typically expect. So for example, let's just arbitrarily throw out numbers. Let's say you would expect a player to typically come back at, again, just making this number up, 60% of the player they were. With KD's extended timeline and being able to work on certain deficits and work on movements and compensations, let's say you expect him to be back at 75%, so that floor is raised. However, going from that floor back to his 100%, if he can ever get there, still involves a very similar process to a player who was back earlier. It still involves that reacclimation period. And that's because there's 3 key things that are inherent after an Achilles rupture and returning, regardless of how long you've been off for. The first is the fact that after Achilles surgery, that tendon elongates by up to 10%, and that changes the length tension dynamic of the calf muscle and the tendon, which can then inhibit performance. For more detail on that, read the great athletic article by Seth Partnow in which he interviewed an Achilles tendon researcher and expert. With that Achilles elongation, a player can compensate and get around it with global compensation and movement strategies, but it takes time, especially as you get back to real games. Secondly, there are long-term deficits after an Achilles rupture, and the research bears this out, especially in the calf muscle and calf strength. And that's something that KD, again, will be dealing with, and hard to regain those fitness deficits without the intensity of games, and you cannot replicate that off the floor. So again, that's another factor for KD. Thirdly is the mental aspect. There's a term called kinesiophobia, called fear of injury or fear of movement, which is quite common after long-term injuries, where a player has to overcome some of those mental hurdles of, am I okay to do this move? Am I going to re-injure this when I push off? Other aspects when you're going into a crowded lane and you're not thinking about it subconsciously. That's a natural reacclimation process for KD as he gets back into these games. That being said, a key positive for KD is that his game never really relied on athleticism. Offensively, he's able to use his length, his positioning, and his shooting ability to be dominant offensively, and then defensively, he's able to use his length, positioning, and his mental reading and anticipation of the game to also have a great impact on that end. So even though he may not be the same player for this next season, I would expect that to be closer to what we see the following season after this one. He can still make a significant impact on that Nets team and roster.